like, life is not what it should be. And instead of trying to do a depression scale, they wanted to talk, where is God in the middle of this loss? And that's when I found my calling. It was right after that I went and served at something called Lutheran Volunteer Corps. So basically you spend a year living in Christian community, volunteering full-time for a nonprofit. I was in an inner city Milwaukee church, coordinating partners, doing the work of God. And so it was from then that I went to seminary. Then they put me in these big churches, and then I finally landed at Church on the Street. There was one day, so Pastor Rebel, her family was a member of Peace Lutheran. So I watched Church on the Street from the beginning and thought, that is the coolest congregation ever. And then one day at lunch, she told me that she was leaving and that I needed to discern if I was going to be the next one called to Church on the Street. I said, no, I love it at Peace. Why would I leave? But then she asked me to preach, and I got to worship. And Crystal, I don't know if you remember this moment. Can I tell our story? So I'm sitting there with my mom, and Pastor Rebel was getting ready to, was her last time. And apparently she had been telling people that someone is coming, the board hasn't approved them yet, but there's somebody that is most likely coming that you know and already trust. And Crystal came in front of my chair, just like you're sitting here, and said, you have to be the one. And I said, what do you mean? And I said, she goes, Pastor Rebel said there's somebody coming that I know and trust, and it has to be you. To which all I could do was stand up and start crying and hug her.
She didn't tell me. I knew automatically.
And that night, I went back to Peace where I was preaching, and I told the senior pastor what had happened, and he said, Chris, that's what we call an anointing. I was like, oh. So here we are, over 2 years later, and Church on the Street continues to be a place of God's love and compassion, just like Pastor Rebel started from the beginning. And so one of the things that I had planned before I even thought about being called to Church on the Street was that during pandemic, my husband's a pastor too. And so we both had 2 years of continuing ed dollars built up. And then a friend said, hey, do you want to go to the Holy Land? It's like, yeah. And I even have money saved, right? So I started at Church on the Street in November. And by the time, it's actually this week, 2 years ago, is when my husband and I and a few friends went to the Holy Land. And as you come into Capernaum, there at the gate as you walk in, you see this. Capernaum, the hometown of Jesus. So the place where Jesus just kept coming back to in the scriptures happens to be Capernaum. One of the things when you visit there is that this statue is there. So right there where Jesus said, all the blessed are's. Blessed are the merciful, blessed are the meek, blessed are those who hunger and thirst. But also, it's right in the middle of that garden where this statue is. And when we had our offices over at First Lutheran, this was a picture that hung on the wall. And folks would come in, for whatever reason, a lot of folks wander in, and they would say, well, what is that? I'd say, that's a statue of Jesus, because Jesus didn't have a place to lay his head. He was homeless. And the look that people get when they start to make this connection, wow. Jesus knew what it was like. Jesus knows what I'm going through. And that connection would open up all kinds of conversation. It would open up an understanding of who Jesus is in a whole new way. Because so much in our world is prosperity gospel that says if you pray the right prayer, if you work really hard, if you do X, Y, and Z, then Jesus is going to love and bless and save you. But the reality is that you are already beloved of God, just as you are, even though you need food today. God loves you. And that connection is is truly who we are. Talked a little bit about worship, but when we gather as the people of God, it's an event. We do it once a month. We feed about 150, I think it was 170 at December worship. Folks come to hear the word, to share the sacrament. Pastor Rubble was great at noticing the things that people needed. And so she realized early on that a lot of times people aren't having birthdays celebrated. So at the end of each worship, adults get a full-size towel with a shampoo, conditioner, body wash, and we sing happy birthday. And the kids get a little bag as well, just to make sure that we celebrate the individuals who are coming through. And as time has gone on, it just continues to be more folks who are recognizing and showing up. And what we do a lot is get people the things that they need. Especially in the summer, I pull up in the park, I open my back hatch, and before I know it, there are guys coming to get the water out of my trunk because they just know my Honda Pilot. But it's where people come together to be the people of God. This is a bank owner and one of our main volunteers. Be in church together. Sacraments, right? Absolutely beautiful. This little one, 6th grade. One day, and people just blurt stuff out. I love it. Like the whole filter comes off a lot. And so her mom was standing right beside her. She goes, "Pastor Chris, I want to be baptized. My siblings are, but I'm not." Cool. Can we get together before our next worship and talk about that? So she comes in my office and I said, "Why do you want to be baptized?" Well, I know the story of Jesus, but baptism promises that God's love is mine forever. I'm like, yeah, let's make that promise. And so, I'm not sure if you can see it in the picture, but for this, she dyed her hair blue. I had blue nail polish on. And the picture was taken by Steve. Everybody just comes with whatever skill and talent they have. Steve is a guy who loves photography. And he comes and takes our people's pictures and then prints them off so that they will have family portraits. Because if you've ever bought family portraits, you know how expensive those are. And sharing the body and blood of Christ. This is what it looks like when we worship inside. They let us rent this space, and then we have people that come and faithfully set it all up, worship, birthday presents, a meal, and take it all back down. There are giveaways always. We have quilts that come from many, many different places, which makes it so that we can be extremely generous. Right now where we are, I mentioned the Multicultural Center offices. So in those spaces, we're now getting to know the people who work at Falls Community Health and in the county buildings. And now Lutheran Social Services, as they are resettling families, they'll stop by our place because they know they can get warm gear, quilts, food, hygiene items. And that's a lot for a one-stop place. And we're able to just freely give. And whenever I need more, I have the quilters' numbers in my phone. One text will make it so I stop at a number of different churches if I need to. This was last year, but as we worship, this was our Christmas worship. And we have a church called Gloria Dei over on the southeast side of town. And they come every December, bring a stocking for every single adult. The kids' stockings come from Peace. Don't worry, don't forget about the kids. But they bring their candles so that we get to sing Silent Night as a congregation with our candles for Christmas. So much of everything that we do, I hated Greek, but some of it is so important, right? So in the Greek translation of salvation, it's actually health, healing, and wholeness. Salvation isn't this, when you die, you go to heaven and you are saved. But it's health, healing, and wholeness now. And so as Church on the Street, that is my model, my guide for who we are, is we are the people who are bringing tangible health, healing, and wholeness in whatever way that is. Whether that's meeting someone on the street, or when they come to the office, or being here with you. That's what we're about. And so it is wonderful to be joined today. I have Skylar, if you want to stand up, wave. Skylar is our director of organization, ordering all of the food pantry stuff from Feeding South Dakota, coordinating everything that comes in, and then Crystal volunteers Monday, Wednesday, Friday. The office hours are 10 to 1, but then you have to organize everything before you leave and clean up all the boxes. It is quite the deal that is becoming because of our new location for that office. But these other things are continuing. So it's just more. And then people stay and they say, hey, you know what, how can I help out today? We keep them going. And that's one of our mission partners, Pastor Rick. He's been around for a while. This is our worship in the park. Yes, Becky is our musician. I'll tell her what I'm going to preach, and she comes back with what songs we are singing. And we are a group that runs on prayer. Whether we are gathered for worship in the laundromat, or people text me all the time, we have a prayer newsletter that goes out monthly so that people are held in prayer. This month was an odd month for us. It was the first time we have ever canceled worship, but we were supposed to worship on the second Saturday when there was a blizzard warning with negative 40 degrees. So what we ended up doing was there were a couple staff people and one volunteer named Gary, who I can't keep away. I just think he wanted to drive in the snow. But we just got some Casey's pizza and some warm gear. And as folks were walking by, we said, do you need any warm stuff and a piece of pizza? And so there were a dozen folks who had slept at the Dudley, but just to stay in the Bishop Dudley all day is really hard. So they were wandering by, but got some warm gear. Thankfully, one of my friends was there, and she's a librarian at the downtown library. And so we were encouraging folks then to say, you know, once you go from here, the next warm place that you might want to stop is the library. And there's some stigma around the library sometimes with our folks, but she had the time to talk them through it when they weren't there, of services and things that they can receive. So always doing this work together. My guess is that this picture would be from Arts in the Park. And it was probably Pastor Pat, and then right beside her is Harriet, who is our director of Laundry with Love. Harriet has been doing this ministry with Rebels since forever ago. So super blessing. She is now in the final stages of planning our health and healing event that is this Saturday. So we're going to go in that multicultural center and offer all different kinds of things bringing salvation. Everything from haircuts and nails and makeup and the ability to get your picture taken, but also dental screenings. They were going to have folks that can get people referred to sign up for the expanded Medicaid, addiction services, a spiritual table, giveaways, food, all these things. And Harriet plans all that. And I just show up and hug the people. And there's Cindy gathering the prayer requests during a worship. Yeah, one of our other ecumenical partners is First United Methodist. And so this is their children's minister, Stacy, and she shows up every time we have worship or a big event. And that way the kids get to know her, and she has children's time during the message. Oh yeah, we're also a place that interprets worship into American Sign Language. We had one lady who I can talk to if I look directly at her. We can communicate. But my old church, Peace Lutheran, has Heartland Epitha, which is an interpreted service. And so when I invited folks to come over, now it turns out that Augustana University students are coming to interpret for us. And we have a growing number of deaf and hard of hearing people who are hearing the word for the first time. So that's a growing edge as well. Hey, that's birthday. That's the birthday giveaways. And then groups come and volunteer. This would be a group, First United Methodist, when they volunteered. And we just, bundle up and get out with the folks. Or sweat it out. This was a group so we do a lot of street ministry and we need stuff for that. So this group is up in Del Rapids. And those confirmation kids just started one-upping each other so that they made 1,300 snack kits. And we took those out for a while.
That lasted quite a while.
It did. So groups just approach however they, whatever your piece is. Like I have a group coming in Wednesday evening who said, there's a lot of giving at Christmas, but what if we do a cold weather drive all through January and then hand it out at the end of January when folks have lost a lot of things? So we've got a confirmation crew coming to do that in the midst of their own congregation being hit by a tornado a couple of years ago, and they're almost ready to move out. They are worshiping in the funeral home, almost ready to go back to their space, but still so mission-minded that those kids will be with me at the banquet on Wednesday. Laundry with love. Quite the crew. Sometimes we get more volunteers than we know what to do with, which is like the coolest part. So then we just visit and be God's people together. So the laundromat is Clifton 3rd, and we get a lot more variation in how we are serving folks once the summer hits, because we are able to get a haircut trailer over there and sometimes set up in the church parking lot across from the laundromat. Plus the folks who are living in the parks, we will drive by on our way and be like, hey guys, it's laundry night. And so they'll bring everything that they have and be able to get that all washed and a meal. So we see all kinds of folks living in parks and cars. This past week was just something everyone should be aware of. It's called the point in time count. And so once a year, all across the country, there's a count of folks who were unsheltered on Tuesday night. And so there's an app on our phone, those of us that were counting. It's called Counting Us. And that's how we get the statistics that we do have. And that's how we get federal dollars to be able to walk with folks. So that just happened this week. One of the things that is really hard is that if a person was staying with a friend, they don't count because they had a roof and they had heat and hot water. So the numbers of who was where, always undercounting. I had a conversation with someone from one of the smaller places around here. Sorry, it's been a week. But that person was just saying that there were only like 2 agencies that were actually even trying to count the people, possibly in Watertown, right? And then here in Sioux Falls, the numbers that we have is that this past school year, at some point during the school year, there were 1,200 kids that had experienced homelessness right here in Sioux Falls. So that's just a little snapshot of what we're working with. But the laundromat's a place for people. So they let us have this sliding window, roll it up, keep our things in there, but also serve the meal, which is delightful. It does take money to do this. That's a combined Lutheran Methodist congregation in Woonsocket, maybe? And then it's fun in the summer If I know that we're going to have the haircut trailer outside, I have to go to the dollar store and buy bubbles and chalk. And this is what happened when I brought chalk. I was like, oh my goodness. Yeah, so $600 to $800 is what it takes to wash and dry the laundry. We have partners. This is Pastor Dan. I got to preach up in Volga, and he was trying to get his congregation to buy new underwear that we could give away. And so he said, I'm going to wear, and this was Reformation, which for Lutherans is the day that we celebrate Luther starting the Reformation. And so he wore red boxers and said, I'm going to wear these on the outside of my pants to worship until we get 300 pairs of new underwear. The congregation got the new underwear by the next Sunday, and he said, oh no, we're going for 500 pairs. So it gets fun. And that's Pastor Rebel. So if you were trying to think, who was she? This is, yeah. Tremendous affection for her.
Where is she now?
She is now, this is one of those great stories. So she is now in northwestern Minnesota. So the thing is that since we're an authorized ministry of our denomination, there's a person in the Senate office that helps us do our stuff. So that person, Bill Tesh, who helped Rebel start Church on the Street, is now a bishop. And now Rebel is the one helping him start new churches. See how that works. So that's where she went to. And we do. This is Cindy and Dre, both were elsewhere today, but yeah, my sister-in-law is now a pastor. And then it's just, we never do anything in a vacuum. This is our partner and also a board member, Journey of Hope. So this family lost a son. He was out on the streets. Kid grew up confirmed. I mean, so many of these folks are like anybody else. You just never know what's going to happen. And he ended up dying on the streets of Sioux Falls. And so his parents have this ministry, Journey of Hope, so that they give out backpacks with hygiene items in them and just say, by showing up, people will call on us or know who to look for when that crisis hits. And we know that we are saving lives because of it. And so we partner. And so they are always around. And they also are doing art therapy now in a number of places, Union Gospel Mission and McCrossin, I believe. Bishop Dudley is who lets us have an office. Pastor Pat and Anya are delightful partners that will go. I don't know if you've ever told the congregation this, but I have never been in a place where I could say, hey, if you're looking for me, I'm going to be, the corner of McDonald's from 1 until 4 on Thursday afternoon. If you need anything, come find me. Well, people come for pastoral care for that solid 3 hours, showing up for prayer, for communion, to share life, just to eat the cookies. And so we show up and let people know that we're there. Just this week, one of the rougher guys, while I was there, got the news that his 3-year-old granddaughter had died en route from one hospital to another with an infection. It's just those times that are so good to be able to be with folks, sharing the sorrow, but also the prayers and the promise that God is going to see that family through. Yeah, that's the office. There's our photographer, Steve. That was definitely an Easter family portrait for those kids. Bread Break is another amazing partner. That's how we get the Breadsmith bread and a number of other things. That's a ministry that is reclaiming different breads and desserts all over town, getting them where they can be used. Arts in the Park. Why not order 300 t-shirts and go out in the park and tie-dye them on the hottest day in the summer and order, 30 pizzas. So that's an annual tradition for us. Kind of like our Vacation Bible School, only everybody participates. I had someone say, I brought my niece, and I don't know why she keeps wearing that t-shirt, because she didn't even do that great a job on it. I said, it's the memories. She made that shirt. That's how it is for our folks. That's what health and healing looks like when it is set up for this coming week. Yep. So different people at different times will just say, this is who I am or what I would like to do. Is that helpful? And we connect. And so if you have any of those or know folks, I did bring some brochures that should be out as well. There's the haircuts. Our table, so communion and prayer. Freezer meals are a big deal. So Fruits of the Freezer is a thing that Pastor Rebel started that continues to be a deal in our pantry. So that freezer will hold everything from stuff that we get from Feeding South Dakota. Feeding South Dakota knew we were moving. So they called us and said, hey, there's this other group in town that needs to donate like roughly $1,000 worth of produce and meat from local farmers. And we're going to pay the farmers the fair price, and you're going to give it away for free. Yeah, what? So I get the first email, and it's like $1,200, and I just emailed back and said, just confirming that we are not paying for this, right? And she said, no, you'll get an invoice so you'll know how much you get donated every week. But this is a group over at another church. There are some folks that are members of Thrivent, and Thrivent is a financial company, and you can get $250 cards for a project. And so people use those for all kinds of things at church on the street. And this group then cooked up $250 worth of groceries, put it in freezable things, gave it to us so that we could give people pre-made, good homemade meals. One of our cookie bakers, Shirley. And the kits are always coming through and extremely helpful. You just never know what folks are going to need at any given time. And we do this all because we are church together. What did I miss?
Things that we do.
Yeah, what else do people need to know?
Pretty consistently, every once in a while, even today, we'll get knit hats and things like that. People put their crochet and knitting skills to work.
Yep, crochet and knitting, that's great.
Let's see, what else comes in? Our canteen kits, I know you kind of covered that with the snack thing, but I like the canteen kits because they tend to have some good protein in it. They have the tuna crackers packages and some Slim Jim meat stick,
Especially for folks whenever folks come to the pantry, you're always assessing their life situation. Do you have a freezer or a refrigerator? Do you have something to cook on? Do you have a microwave? Or are you living in a tent? And that makes a difference in what kind of food people get. So our pantry isn't one where we can just hand over the stuff in a box like Feeding South Dakota does. It's very individualized based on who is coming through and what that need is. Absolutely. And canteen kits help because when folks are transient, here's some protein and something to drink, and that helps out a lot. Yeah. Wondering what thoughts and questions you all have.
Where do you collect your food for the pantry? Or do people just bring it down to the multicultural center?
Yep, so when the office is open from 10 to 1 is when we can receive food. And so that happens in a number of ways. If it works during that time, great. If not, we'll arrange a time, or we're always around town and pick stuff up too. There are a number of times that there's the security guy at the building where we are, and he's extremely helpful getting stuff in for us, but also just as really become another member of church on the street in so many ways. Yes, so how many times a week do you go to Feeding South Dakota?
2 or 3 times a week.
2 or 3 times is how often we restock the pantry. And then also Greater Goods is another store that gets, Pastor Lil probably goes 2 or 3 times a week. Greater Goods is a store just north of town, run by the VOA where returned items go and we can buy them for cents on the dollar. So we were getting coats, like winter coats for $5 each. Thermal underwear was 50 cents or $1. I think underwear are up to 50 cents, but they used to be 10 cents. So a lot of times we can stretch dollars by using, and Pastor Lil, she is so involved now, retired Lutheran pastor out of Sioux City. She has her own key to get in the office, and we had to get her a credit card because she had spent $2,000 of her own money and needed to be reimbursed. So we continue to grow and try to meet the needs of folks. Yeah.
You probably don't have room for clothing donations.
We have clothing, especially seasonally appropriate.
I organize that all the, oh,
Yep.
I have OCD really bad too. I organize that nonstop.
So the clothing donations, Crystal uses her OCD to get organized in the office. And then especially when we have big events, we put out donations. And whether that's a laundry or worship, we'll put all of those out on the table. And then whatever we can give away, we do. And whatever doesn't go, we end up taking a lot of times to Union Gospel Mission for their thrift store.
I was gonna ask, if we're donating and you can't take it, where do we go? Union Gospel Mission?
Union Gospel is typically where we take it.
Are you affiliated with, donated men's clothing, like Dress for Success for men?
Question about Dress for Success for men. So, sort of, in a roundabout way. We are, so when the Multicultural Center became under the management of Lutheran Social Services just a couple years ago, then the Multicultural Center staff moved their offices over to that 6th Street location, the Center for New Americas. And when that happened, there used to be a career closet at the Multicultural Center, and that moved with the offices. And so now it's that old career closet that is our food pantry. So we are constantly sending people over to that. And then the other thing is, when we know shoe sizes and different things like that, I will text Pastor Lil, I'm looking for a size 10 in guys' boots because someone has a construction job. And so she'll go and find those somewhere in town so we can get people to work. So, yes.
So related to the Multicultural Center, I'm curious, what are the numbers like, percentages like, of immigrants, new refugees that are on the street that you're, compared to the resident folks?
So the new refugees and immigrants that we're helping, those folks are housed. So they're just getting their basics from us to be able to start life in a new country. But there are a number of folks who, one of the things that we see over and over is accumulated life trauma. If you've ever heard of, what's the name of it?
Generational.
Not generational, but there's, I can't pull it out now. Adverse childhood experiences. So there's literally a chart of these things that folks may have experienced in childhood, and how that affects throughout a lifetime. And I really see that compounding in a lot of our people. So if somebody is coming from a country that has had amazing war and violence, fleeing for their life, just what that does mentally and what that leads to is, in my experience, how our guys who are living in the park, that's their background. A number of folks, of course, come over and make it and are doing wonderful, but sometimes there's just that compounding effect that just makes it so much harder. Like I was talking with one of our regulars, the question is just like, why can't I get my feet under me? Why can't I, hold down a job? And we started to talk about those experiences, and I went through the list. And she said yes to every single thing on that list. She was abused as a child. There were drugs and alcohol in the home. Parents were split. Mom had mental illness. Like just everything down the list. And I said, I've had some of those, but not all of them. But my husband never experienced one of those adverse childhood events. So if you just start from saying, by the time you hit 18, everything you had gone through and everything that he had going for him, you start to see where some of those struggles really come from.
So a little follow-up to that, in the field of biology, we're finding out this whole area called epigenetics. And what happens to those moms, those people that are experiencing trauma, gets passed on to their kids. And it's called epigenetics. And we don't totally understand how it works, but it definitely happens to the next generation. Somehow that trauma gets passed on.
Right, and right now some Augustana folks, there's a professor of religion and a nursing professor. Are you familiar with their project? So they're going into specifically Native communities and working with pregnant women to be working through that trauma. I did my pastoral internship over at Augustana in the chapel there, and so I was the pastor of one of them, and the other one was a professor while I was over there. So just to hear what they are doing because of what happens biologically is huge. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. The question is there church on the street in other places? Thankfully, yes. So the way that Church on the Street was born was that the Lutheran congregations were getting together saying, what does our area need and what can we do together? They said, we need a pastor, especially for people dealing with homelessness and poverty. So Pastor Rebel and one other gal, Carolyn, went to Texas to learn about, there was a gathering of street ministers, and it was there that they learned the methods. And so the cross that I wear is called the Ecclesia Cross, and this is worn by street ministers all over. And so there's, like every other year, we get together and we learn and we talk and we educate others. I got to learn how to walk. I was already at Church on the Street, but within my first year, I went out to San Francisco and walked the Tenderloin District and was learning about street ministry there. So we do have that support. And then within my denomination, we have what's called the Homeless and Justice Network. And so it's ELCA churches that are, in one form or another, doing very similar work. And that is where my coach is from. Because any other pastor that would try to coach me would be saying, you're doing way too much social work, or different things. But it's a different beast, but yes. And there are a couple international locations with this style of street ministry too. We all look a little different, but the support and the way it was born was my favorite. So it was in Boston, the Episcopalians out there. So this gal, this pastor had graduated from seminary, but didn't have a call to a church yet. And so she just decided to go out in Boston Commons and read the gospel, the Easter gospel, on Easter morning and offer communion to whoever was around and wanted to share the sacrament. And there happened to be a reporter wandering by, took her picture, and she laid it on the front page of the paper. And then her bishop called, because that is not allowed. And said, what do you think you're doing? But what she was doing was spreading word and sacrament, and unbeknownst to her, starting a movement of street churches. That's our formal start.
What percentage of your congregation are men, women, and children?
That would mean I kept numbers. Roughly, so, right. And it all depends on, my brain is just, because there's everything from the folks who access the office to people at Bishop Dudley, worshipers. It is a big split of men and women. Most of my volunteers are our women in the office, at least. Like, the kids vary based on the season. We can get 5 to 10 at a worship that we'll go over for children's time, but when it's Easter and we have 5,000 eggs to hunt, that number goes up. Yeah. And people connect to us, certainly who are housed. It's not like someone is going to be living on the streets forever or always have a place. So one of the things that ends up happening is that, like, there was a communion visit I did this week for someone who I knew when they lived at the Bishop Dudley, but now that they're in the apartments behind Best Buy, they're away from that community. And so we keep those visits happening. I mean, thankfully now medicated and has an apartment, which is great, but missing the community connection. Yeah, and there are a number that even in my 2 years have cycled from, like this one lady, love her. She got an apartment, was so excited for her, got her settled, but then her son and grandson needed a place to stay. And when she let them move in, that then is not allowed by the housing that she receives. So then she got booted out of her place, and now she's back at the mission. So the way and the systems that we have set up just really aren't conducive to living a lot of times. And the amount of places that I go in where just atrocious living conditions are happening. Just this week, one of my ladies was telling me that when she tries to cook dinner, there are times that cockroaches will scurry across the meal that she's trying to cook. Like, it's that bad in her place. Broken freezer, sometimes the fridge works, and the hot water was going on and off. Yeah.
That leads me to another question. A difficult one, I think. What, in your opinion, would be the best change in structure of us
Yeah.
to make it easier for unhoused people to find shelter and succeed?
I really like what the tiny houses with the veterans are doing. From everything that I've read and studied, the housing first approach is huge. So if someone's on the street and they can get housing and they, you set it up with some food so it's just ready to move in, leave them alone for a little while, and then have the social worker right on site so that when they're ready to work on whatever it is that landed them there, they've got the support right there. And so I can't wait to see how that project is changing things. And since it's not through any, it's its own thing, even if someone just went to basic training for one day, they're eligible to be part of that. It has nothing to do with your discharge.
Can you say a little bit more about what that is?
Yeah, so just recently, there's been a group that has built a community of tiny homes for veterans that are experiencing homelessness in Sioux Falls. And so within that community, there is just all the services are right there on site, your social worker, the program coordinator, and so folks can go directly from living on the street to living in this tiny home while they work on whatever needs to be worked on in their life. And so that has just been a recent thing for us here in Sioux Falls. And then one of my old confirmation leaders is a social worker through the VA who works with homeless veterans. So whenever I need anything for my veterans, she is a call or a text away. And now, instead of seeing her at confirmation, I see her out on the streets. So that's a huge thing, is that we're networked with so many folks to try to meet the needs, but the needs are a lot greater than, so there's this group now in Whittier who's trying to make it so that they can fix up people's houses, and there's a tool lending library and great things happening. And somebody said, hey, Pastor Chris, can we do this build for your folks? And I said, honestly, most of my folks are living in apartments, and it's landlords that need to get the work done. It's not so much that my people own their homes and need help keeping them up. I only really know of one of my people that owns her own home.
Does the city have standards for rentals that we can enforce? Are they willing to be a partner in this?
Supposed to. And so,
Pressure them to do that.
show up and ask questions. One of the other things that we are closely working with is Thrive. So Thrive in Sioux Falls is concerned with the workforce development. So from the time you're born until you go to work. And so they're the ones that we partnered with a lot of Church on the Street partners to get like the Eat Well Sioux Falls mobile market, but they also work in housing. And so this summer they presented their findings of a big study about housing and affordability and what needs to be done. And so the city did put $6 million in a trust so that we could start to work on affordable housing. Because if you look at those numbers of what people are making and how much rent is, it's just ridiculous. Yeah.
So what is your dream?
What is my dream? Right now, honestly, it is, we are right on the cusp of having an intern, and the work is so much that if we could have a deacon, so a word and sacrament minister, that would make it so we would be able to multiply the spiritual care that we're getting folks. And there is someone who is ready to go into internship and wants to be with us starting in the fall. And that would give us the opportunity to see, because at one point we did have another half-time pastor that was part of Church on the Street. And now it's just really feeling like if I had more time, we could be doing a lot more for folks than we already are. Yeah, Skylar, what's a big?
Small-time big dream, a second freezer, because we have had such an increase in folks seeking help from us
Yeah.
that it's hard to restock the pantry properly since we only have the one freezer.
Yeah.
So even when I can get a really good deal on meat from Feeding South Dakota, I'm limited by space.
Yeah,
And so it really complicates things as far as me restocking to not have
the extra freezer
the
space.
extra freezer space.
Because our numbers have shot up. It used to be that we could run to Feeding South Dakota once
We were just talking about.
once a week or once every other week, depending
Yeah.
on what showed up. But now it's so constant because the other thing is our space is small
It is.
for what we're doing. So,
And that's something that Skylar and I were talking about the other day, when we were in a church,
yeah,
we hardly saw what we saw, and now.
right, we're triple where we
now
were
that
for
we're at
food.
Falls Community Health Building, it's like, I swear it was 20 to 30, 40 families a day.
Yeah, a couple weeks ago, we hit a record for a single day, which was 47 households in a
47 households in one day.
And it is not slowing up much. We get days where it's like 35, 38.
Weather dependent when it was,
Weather dependent, but we've been consistently
Yeah.
getting more busy days, and I think part of it is being January. A lot of people are the poorest ever after Christmas.
Yep.
You know? And
Could you recap, what he said?
yes.
For the
Oh,
people watching
thank you.
online?
So the question, so Skylar, staff member, was saying that even a freezer would be helpful because we are just seeing the uptick in the volume of people coming through. And so where it used to be 100 families a month, we're up to 300 sometimes. But also we had a record day where we had 47 families that were served in that 3-hour window when our office is open. And so the other thing right now is that we are waiting for the county to clarify the contract with LSS so that LSS can then take us from a month-to-month contract to more of a yearly contract. Because we do have some folks that are ready to come in, overhaul our shelving, get it uniform and usable, but until we have that yay from the city, or from the county, we've been living in limbo since the summer. Yeah. So our ministry is just everywhere, wherever it happens to be. A number of times, it's just growing in a person in a freezer. Yeah. Thanks for asking.
Can I just say one thing before you're done?
Okay. Do you want the microphone?
Oh, sure.
People online?
Yes. I just want to remind the congregation, if you don't know, Greater Goods, First Press does have a membership there. We have 4 people that have cards, whatever they're. But the deacons use that frequently. So it's good that the congregation be aware that we have access to that and we can get there. The other thing is, I also want to let you know, I don't know if you're aware, but Peaceworks has actually been creating, and Lois, I'm looking at you, they have created banners, military banners for every little house that was made. That was kind of a nice welcoming thing. So I just wanted you all to know that First Press has involvement with Greater Goods, and thank you, Lois, for the tiny houses. What? Quarterly.
$750,
Yeah.
$3,000 a year. So that is just right
Yeah.
on the cusp of happening.
So yes.
Thank you, mission team. We will hang out for a little while, so anything that you didn't get to ask, that you can come. Also, make sure you find the brochures if you're looking for more information. It's wonderful to be with you all and to be doing this work together. Because as God calls us and sends us, we just never know where we are going to be sent. But we go together, sharing God's goodness. Thank you.